Major James Harris risked everything in Afghanistan, saving lives and showing extraordinary heroism, only to have the Army erase all records of his bravery. Bureaucrats and officials seemed determined to bury his achievements, dismissing his sacrifices as if they had never happened. But with the help of attorney Kathy Mitchell, James fought back, uncovering evidence that could not be ignored. And just wait until you see how the court restored his honor, and why justice in the end finally triumphed. Major James Harris stepped off the plane and into the humid late afternoon air of his hometown, a place that should have felt familiar, safe, welcoming. But everything felt different now. After months in Afghanistan, after missions that tested his body and his mind in ways few could imagine, James expected relief, recognition, even a quiet sense of accomplishment. His unit had saved dozens of lives during a harrowing operation in a remote province. He had led from the front, coordinating evacuations, shielding his team from danger, and making split-second decisions that ultimately spared countless civilians. The medals, the commendations, the official acknowledgement, they were supposed to be waiting for him. Instead, he was met with silence. Weeks after returning home, James began the paperwork process for his military awards. At first, he thought it would be straightforward. A few forms, a stack of after-action reports, signatures from commanding officers. But when he inquired at the archives, his stomach sank. The files containing detailed accounts of his heroism were nowhere to be found. Not misplaced, not delayed, gone. Entire reports, months of documentation, vanished from the system. Emails were unanswered, calls went straight to voicemail, and every bureaucratic office he visited offered vague explanations and polite apologies, none of which explained the disappearance of his record. Shock gave way to disbelief. Then, disbelief became anger. This wasn't a simple error. It was a dismissal of everything he had risked, every decision he had made under life-or-death pressure. James could not comprehend the enormity of what had happened. The system he had trusted, the very institution he had devoted his career to, had erased him. It felt personal. It felt like betrayal. James paced his small living room late at night, staring at the framed photographs of his unit, the letters from fellow soldiers, and the medals he had earned in previous missions. He thought of the men and women who had relied on his leadership, whose lives were safer because of his actions. And now, in his own country, recognition for that sacrifice was denied, buried under layers of red tape and bureaucracy. Rage simmered inside him, not a blind fury, but a focused, searing anger at the injustice, at the arrogance of a system that could erase the truth with the flick of a pen or the misplacement of a file. He thought about the sacrifices he had endured, the long months away from family, the sleepless nights, the physical pain that would not fade. And for what? To be reduced to a name, a number, a missing file in a labyrinthine archive? That thought made his jaw tighten and his hands clench. He could feel the anger coiling inside, demanding action, refusing complacency. For James Harris, this was not just a bureaucratic failure. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down by the very institution he had served. And deep down, beneath the hurt and the fatigue, he knew he would not rest until his story was told, until the truth of his heroism could no longer be ignored. This was the first spark in a fire that would drive him toward justice, a fire fueled by anger, resilience, and an unshakable sense of duty. Back home, the reality of what had happened began to weigh on James Harris like a heavy, invisible burden. The initial shock and rage of discovering his erased records had begun to fade, but in its place came a deeper, more persistent ache, a pain that gnawed at his confidence and sense of purpose. Outside, life moved on with familiar rhythms. Neighbors waved, the city bustled, children played in the streets. Yet inside, James felt dislocated, as if he were trapped behind a transparent wall that separated him from a world that no longer recognized him. Friends and former comrades tried to reach out, offering words of encouragement, gestures of support, and invitations to share stories of his service. They wanted to help, but no matter how sincere, their reassurances could not erase the gnawing sense of invisibility. On paper, James was nobody. No medals, no citations, no acknowledgement from the very institution that had demanded so much of him. The accomplishments that had once defined him now seemed hollow, reduced to whispers and memories that the world refused to hear. At home, the atmosphere grew tense. His wife Laura understood the pain in ways words could not capture. She watched the man she had married, the one who had faced danger with calm courage, struggle with sleepless nights, bouts of frustration, and moments of quiet despair. Their young son Daniel noticed too. He would ask his father to tell the stories of his missions, of the lives James had helped save. But each time James began, the memories were shadowed by the knowledge that no one else would acknowledge them. It pained him to see his son's admiration, knowing that the world outside their home might never recognize the hero standing before him. Each denied request for investigation, each bureaucratic dead end, became another layer of weight pressing down on James. Emails went unanswered, letters returned marked "file missing." Phone calls ended in polite but meaningless apologies. The repeated dismissals were not just frustrating, they were isolating. Slowly, James began to question whether anyone would ever truly see the sacrifices he had made, the decisions he had taken under unbearable pressure, and the courage it had required to act when others could not. The pain was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, relentless, and suffocating. It lived in the hollow feeling in his chest when he looked at his reflection, in the subtle stiffness in his shoulders when he returned home each evening, in the sense of separation from a world that moved forward without him. James felt the erosion of his identity, the hollowing out of recognition that he had earned, the sting of being forgotten by those who had once relied on him. Yet even in this pain, a faint ember remained. It was the knowledge that the truth of his actions existed, even if hidden by bureaucracy. Each day of isolation, each denied request, each subtle dismissal only added fuel to a quiet determination growing inside him, a determination to reclaim what had been taken, to restore not just medals or paperwork, but the sense of self and honor that defined him. Pain, James realized, was not the end of his story. It was the forge in which the resolve to fight back was being tempered. James Harris refused to let the weight of bureaucracy define his story. The pain, the isolation, the repeated dismissals had been heavy, but now they became the fuel for a relentless pursuit of justice. With quiet determination, he reached out to attorney Kathy Mitchell, a seasoned lawyer known for taking on seemingly impossible cases. Kathy immediately recognized the gravity of James's situation. She saw not just the missing paperwork, but the human cost, the man whose bravery had been buried under layers of indifference and oversight. Together, they began to map out a strategy, a meticulous plan to reclaim the recognition that had been denied. The process was exhausting, both mentally and emotionally. They spent hours combing through old mission logs, photographs, and communications from the field. They tracked down fellow soldiers, commanders, and local civilians who could verify James's actions. Each testimony a thread weaving together a narrative of undeniable heroism. Every new piece of evidence brought them a step closer to exposing the truth, yet the obstacles were relentless. Army representatives challenged documents, questioned witnesses, and attempted to sidetrack the case at every turn. The courtroom became a battlefield of a different sort, a place where patience, precision, and resolve mattered more than physical courage. Despite the tension, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. Every courtroom session strengthened him. Each time an Army official tried to deflect, he met it not with anger, but with unwavering clarity. He knew the truth of his actions and refused to let it be overshadowed. The support of Kathy, coupled with the encouragement of his family, reminded him why he had started this fight. Not for vanity, not for accolades, but to restore integrity to the record of his service, to honor the lives saved, and to reclaim the dignity that had been denied. As the trial progressed, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Witness after witness spoke, recounting James's decisive actions under impossible circumstances. Photographs and reports painted a vivid picture of courage and leadership. Slowly, the narrative of neglect and erasure began to crumble, replaced by one of undeniable heroism. Each piece of evidence built a bridge between past injustice and the recognition that James so rightfully deserved. Then came the decisive day. The courtroom was silent, every eye fixed on the judge as the ruling was delivered. James felt his heart pound, not with fear, but with anticipation and hope. The judge's words carried the weight of justice. James Harris had earned full recognition. His courage, his sacrifices, and his leadership were officially acknowledged. The Army was ordered to correct the bureaucratic failures, restoring medals, citations, and the official record of his heroism. In that moment, James felt a profound sense of triumph. Not just personal victory, but the vindication of truth, integrity, and perseverance. Years of frustration and pain had culminated in this restoration of honor. Tears welled in his eyes as he looked at Laura and Daniel, seeing in them the reflection of his resilience. The fight had been long and grueling, But justice had prevailed. James Harris's story, once nearly buried in indifference, now stood as a testament to the power of determination, the importance of truth, and the courage to confront systems that fail. The ceremony was held in a sunlit auditorium filled with fellow soldiers, veterans, family members, and supporters who had followed James Harris's long journey toward justice. As he stepped forward to receive his medal and official commendation, the room held its collective breath. There was a profound quiet, a moment suspended between the struggle of the past and the recognition of the present. Laura, his wife, held his hand tightly, and Daniel, his son, watched with wide eyes, as if seeing the full measure of his father's courage for the first time. When the medal was placed over his chest, James felt a wave of emotion rise within him. It was not pride in the way that drives ego, but a deep, resonant acknowledgement of every challenge he had faced. The pain of being ignored, the frustration of fighting bureaucracy, the nights spent doubting whether his actions would ever be recognized. Tears glistened not only in his own eyes, but also in the eyes of those who had witnessed his journey. Friends who had stood beside him through months of uncertainty, colleagues who had offered unwavering support, and even strangers who had been inspired by his story could not hold back their own tears. The room seemed to shimmer with a quiet understanding that something profound had been restored. Truth, integrity, and honor. In that moment, James realized the impact of his journey extended far beyond his own recognition. Veterans who had felt overlooked or forgotten saw in him the proof that perseverance and truth could overcome systemic neglect. Young soldiers, some just beginning their careers, looked on with awe and hope, understanding that courage was not measured only on the battlefield, but also in the willingness to confront injustice, to fight for what is right, and to persist when the world seems indifferent. Colleagues and commanding officers, previously skeptical or unaware, now bore witness to a story that could no longer be dismissed, a story that demanded respect and acknowledgement. James became more than a recipient of a medal. He became a symbol that heroism cannot be buried, that the truth, even if suppressed or ignored for years, will eventually find a path to light. His journey demonstrated that courage is not only about facing danger in the field, but also about confronting obstacles in life with integrity, patience, and unwavering determination. The applause that echoed through the auditorium was more than ceremonial. It was a collective recognition of human resilience, of the power of commitment, and of the profound importance of standing for justice even when the odds seem insurmountable. As he looked at Laura and Daniel, James understood that the legacy of his actions was not the medal itself, but the inspiration it could provide. It was the spark that could ignite courage in others, a reminder that standing firm in the face of injustice is never in vain. The story of James Harris would travel beyond the walls of that room, reaching colleagues, veterans, and young recruits alike, and with each telling, it would reinforce the enduring truth: honor and heroism cannot be erased. They may lie hidden for a time, but they will always rise, shining brightly for those willing to fight for what is right. In that moment, James felt complete, not just restored, but transformed. He had faced the depths of frustration and doubt and emerged as a beacon of courage, integrity, and inspiration.